If I said that Sukuna is actually more well balanced as a raid boss villain than most, would you believe me? I was thinking about this as I was doing another video, and I thought despite all the complaints behind Sukuna, I think he's actually balanced and handled extremely well. Judging from the amount of chapters he was built up for, how long he's been fighting, and what we know of him in our own cast, it's really not that bad. And in this video, I'll be explaining why. As much as I would like to continue this intro and talk your ears off, I do value the time of both you and I, so with that said, let's just get straight into the video. Ryomen Sukuna is formally introduced to the series of Jujutsu Kaisen at the very first chapter of the series, titled after himself. Known as the King of Curses, a force of nature, and a human that was unwanted by the world, Sukuna has become an entity that casts a shadow over the entire series the moment he was incarnated into Yuji's body. A strong amount of the conflict within the story either centers around him or comes from him directly. Sukuna has strong enough of a pull to not even be present for most events up until chapter 213, as the narrative shuts down any chance of Sukuna being a get out of free jail card for Yuji, or allowing Sukuna to just wipe everybody and everything off the face of the map. And for the former, his character serving as a malevolent force of nature will not let him help Yuji in any capacity. In the latter, Gege placing a multi-layered lock on the cage that would let Sukuna break free and cause havoc. One, through the binding vow he placed with Yuji to not allow him to hurt anybody in the event that Sukuna willingly takes over Yuji's body. 2. Sukuna being unable to take over Yuji's body under normal circumstances anyway. And 3. Satoru Gojo existing, making a premature possession of Yuji or anybody else's body an unintelligent decision for someone as slimy as Sukuna. Getting into this point a bit more, Sukuna would need most of his fingers to contend with Gojo, and I believe it would be in character for Sukuna to want to have as much access to his power as he could have in order to fight Gojo, as he does hold high respect for him and his strength while being an enjoyer of battle. And the story manages to prevent this battle from coming to fruition through the scattering of Sukuna's 20 fingers, each containing a remnant of his power from the Heian era. These fingers are supposed to be collected by Yuji in order for him to be executed while containing all remnants of Sukuna's strength, by proxy completely eradicating all forms of Sukuna and preventing him from ever returning. Of course, there is a massive risk with undergoing this plan, which is Sukuna getting out of Yuji's control. As Yuji does collect more and more fingers throughout the story responds by becoming more and more grim, coming to a head at the Shibuya incident where we get a taste of Sukuna's power at 15 out of 20 fingers. He completely decimates what we know to be some of the strongest characters in the series at that time. Eventually though, Sukuna would circumnavigate the binding vow that was placed upon him by Yuji, taking a risk at breaking it in order to forcefully feed Megumi a finger imbued with all of his current cursed energy. It works, allowing him to move on from Yuji to Megumi's body, a body where he's free to do whatever he pleases from here on out, even slaughtering the entire cast. Through Sukuna's battle with Ryu, the story communicates this truth to us, as he perception blitzes him with a cleave, killing him before he can even access his cursed technique. It's at this moment that we understand that what Uro, a fighter that was able to rival Yuta Okkotsu, was saying about him being a human calamity was no joke. His power truly is as overwhelming as she made it out to be. Not only this, but he wasn't even at full strength here. So what's going to happen when he does reobtain his full strength? Sukuna as a character was able to be put on a leash due to the narrative for about 200 chapters, but things are now worse than ever. This is a character that's been hinted to be at least an equal to Gojo many times over at his full strength. How can he be sensibly handled from here on out? This is where the Shinjuku Showdown begins. With the reincarnation of Sukuna and Angel witnessing what's happened to Hana, the cast makes the sensible decision to skip the deal and just free Gojo, as at this point, he's the only character with a chance of taking out Sukuna and foiling Kenjaku's plans. Gojo pulls up and him and Sukuna set up the deathmatch, set to take place 1 month from their confrontation on Christmas Eve, this being the beginning of the Shinjuku Showdown, or in other words, the Sukuna Raid. The Sukuna Raid initiates with Gojo taking the vanguard against Sukuna, fighting him alone. He does do this alone because that's when he operates at his best. Most of the time he isn't, he has to worry about his comrades. This feeling would only be amplified 100 times against Sukuna, someone who's not only ruthless and able to match his power, but the most dishonorable sorcerer of them all. Not only this, but the other characters would just provide much more value playing the role of a cleaner to Gojo, rather than fighting alongside him. And as Gojo and Sukuna engage in a 13-chapter bloodbath, Gojo lands a direct, unlimited hollow purple, not only dealing massive near-fatal damage to Sukuna, but also exterminating Maharaga. Sukuna here was weakened enough for Kashimo to come in and battle him. Kashimo does come in and manage to charge up a bolt to fire directly at Sukuna's head, forcing him to reincarnate into his original body. Kashimo from here gets washed, and right after, Yuji and a lineup of other characters come in. Before we get into this battle though, we come to see that the other characters have made multiple plans to combat Sukuna in the event that Gojo were to lose, being certain that Gojo would at least be able to weaken Sukuna, judging by how they were sure that they get a chance to enact these plans. To elaborate further, the characters had planned out this battle for an entire month, throwing plan after plan after plan towards Sukuna in order to continuously weaken him and catch him completely off guard. What makes this aspect of the battle so interesting is that, judging from the dialogue of the characters throughout the battle, every single plan has the intention of ending the battle completely, and if it doesn't, they'll move on to the next plan that's sure to end the battle with Sukuna. These plans are not designed to whittle Sukuna down to a point where somebody can land an ultimate move and call it a day. Even Gojo's battle against Sukuna was supposed to be all they had to do to defeat him, as Gojo even states in one of the most recent chapters that he's sure he's going to win, so they can plan whatever they want in the event that he loses. Sukuna though is such a genius that he manages to navigate his way through each of these plans. Couple the never-ending battle strategies from multiple fighters that Sukuna has to navigate his way through, with Yuji being his kryptonite due to his ability to directly target the boundary between his and Megami's soul. This factors into the battle by making every single attack Yuji lands on Sukuna weaken the control he has over Megami's body, and the less control he has, the weaker he becomes. Yuji has been chaining black flashes on Sukuna on top of attacking this boundary, only making Yuji grow more and more as Sukuna becomes weaker the longer this battle continues. Sukuna, being the con artist of con artists, still manages to remain a massive threat to the entire cast with all these factors combined, as he always has an answer to each contrivance he's faced with. Despite how overpowered Sukuna seems to be due to his ridiculous battle intelligence, what I like most about this battle is the fact that it emphasizes that Sukuna is not just a villain who knows everything, but he really needs to calculate his actions and take risks in split-second real time. And although this is very impressive, it eventually bites him in the ass, as Yuta was able to outsmart him and predict how Sukuna would engage with his copy technique. To elaborate, chapter 250 is a chapter primarily focused on battle, but a lot of Sukuna's thoughts suggest that it was foreshadowing for chapter 263. In chapter 250, Sukuna speaks about Yuji serving to weaken his output and physical control to a point where he can no longer use Hollow Wicker Basket, and then Jacob's Ladder can be used on him. The chapter also includes Yuta using Cleave at the end, as Sukuna recognizes this as his own curse technique. To break down the comparison, chapter 263 primarily has Yuji in total fighting Sukuna, using his techniques and even a binding vow to primarily target the boundary between his and Megami's soul. Hollow Wicker Basket being activated is a non-factor, as there's no domain active. And lastly, the chapter ends with a Jacob's Ladder, basically what Sukuna predicted in chapter 250. But the thing here is that there was no possible way for him to predict things to play out this way again. As Yuta explains in 263 before the second Jacob's Ladder would hit, the strength of the curse technique copy is that those who fight against a copy user will decrease their awareness of the original source of the curse technique, as they begin to focus on how many and what curse techniques that the copy user has without expecting that the original users of the techniques would show up. When they naturally figure out the conditions, they believe that Yuta has stolen the technique from previous opponents rather than replicated it. So those who fight against a copy user don't pick up that its true strength is the ability to hold two of the same card in their hands, or more so the team's hand. This moment displays that Sukuna is very intelligent, to a point where he can predict our hero's plan, but even that intelligence can be exploited if you're deceptive enough. Even this far into the series, Jujutsu Kaisen stays faithful to the power system and the philosophy that surrounds it. In all this to say, Jujutsu Kaisen has done a great job at balancing Sukuna's existence throughout the entire series with all of these obstacles he has to face. And interestingly enough, he faces them because he's not supposed to exist in the modern era in the first place. Sukuna ignoring the rules of the world to exist in the current time is ironic, since he was the first one to introduce the concept of binding vows in the series, and while doing this, he would mention to Yuji that there are always consequences to being greedy. Think about it. Sukuna now has the massive weakness of losing by being removed from Megami's body due to possessing it, a weakness he never had when he was alive because he had his own body. He now has to deal with the massive roadblock that is Satoru Gojo, the only sorcerer in history that's been able to match Sukuna, giving our heroes a chance to actually defeat him. Jujutsu just being more than raw strength now. As of the modern era, it manifests in all sorts of tricky ways that can still pose trouble to Sukuna and continuously catch him off guard. For example, even an ability as stupid as Larue's Heart Catch being a massive contributor to the Shinjuku Showdown. And most of all, Yuji embodying karmic retribution for Sukuna, as he's the only one who can attack Sukuna's soul in every way possible, whether that be through directly attacking it to exorcise him from Megumi's body, or making it waver through his mental endurance. It's a neat touch. Now moving on to a complaint I'd like to tackle about how Sukuna has been handled as of recent chapters is something referred to as the Sukuna cycle. To summarize, during the Sukuna raid, Sukuna would primarily fight one character who'd sometimes be assisted by weaker sorcerers for about 2 to 3 chapters. He'd beat them, then another sorcerer would come up with the intention of fighting Sukuna. Sukuna would then beat them, then the next challenger would come on, and then you get my point. I get being exhausted, but nothing's stopping anybody from just not reading and coming back when the fight's over, as I'm sure you'll interpret it differently once the entire battle is available to read in one sitting. I promise you, putting the phone down, especially when it comes to anime, is much easier than you think. I get that the cycle can be a bit repetitive, but I do think the strategy that the sorcerers have taken has been almost optimal, except for the fact that Higuruma could have been saved for last. But of course, this nitpick can be countered by the fact that Higuruma would insist that he wanted to fight third. Also, Kamutoki more than likely would have wiped everybody handily had it not been removed from the battle at the beginning. Except for that, most of them enacting their own separate multi-layered plans was the best way to go. It keeps Sukuna constantly on his toes with no time to breathe after defeating an opponent, meanwhile ensuring that there's a backup each time someone fails. In some instances, the failure of one plan is used to jumpstart another. For example, Maki being able to remove Sukuna's heart due to her hiding until Yuta would give the signal that his first plan failed. I don't really think that the cycle exists anyways, because there's only been 3 fights where Sukuna has had a strict 1v1 challenger fight throughout this entire thing. These being his fights against Gojo, Kashimo, and Kusakabe, and Kusakabe was not even in sequence with the previous 2. I think it's just a case of heavy exaggeration, and patience is necessary, especially when reading weekly. To conclude, Sukuna is built up to be an unstoppable force of nature throughout the course of the entire series, causing viewers to have no idea how things are going to go the moment he's unleashed. But as sorcerers engage in this massive raid battle against him during the Shinjuku Showdown, we see that this air of invincibility is slowly whittled down through a very meticulous month of planning, fighting Sukuna relentlessly, never giving him a chance to breathe, and lastly, the unwavering determination of the cast to win by any means necessary, even if it means forsaking their life to do so. Each confrontation within the Sukuna raid has contributed massively to the success of all those who have participated, and it can be argued that had a single contributor not shown or failed in their role, everybody would have been screwed, reinforcing just how big of a threat Sukuna is. Contrary to popular opinion, I hold the gradual whittling down of Sukuna to be something very enjoyable rather than ridiculous or boring, and I think time will only reinforce my opinion. I also believe it's important to handle Sukuna as a villain in this manner because the reader will always hold him at high praise in terms of embodying a force of nature, a feature of his identity that is key to his character. All readers know and understand that had Sukuna been at full power, or if he were to give this gauntlet another go, he would destroy it very handily, as he would now have access to the world-cutting slash. This battle against Sukuna is truly a once-in-a-lifetime event for our heroes to exploit. However, this entire raid is not full of ass pulls like people like to say it is, as again, there was way too much build-up surrounding Sukuna's overwhelming power, and the cast meticulously planning to overcome it over a month time span. Sukuna's presence as an unstoppable force of nature is balanced by the combined efforts of multiple sorcerers, and again, multiple, multi-layered plans that seamlessly transition into another, constantly overwhelming him and whittling him down. And I think this has culminated into one of the most interesting battles in recent shonen, which is the raid on Sukuna. With that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you enjoy content such as this, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Appreciate you a ton for watching always, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.